Hello and welcome back to Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football in the English language. I'm Michael Statham. I'm joined by Cal today. Cal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So Cal Goodall, you can find me on Twitter at WHU_analytics. And I'm also here representing Analytics United, which is a site that myself and my good friend Jack Elderton set up at the start of this season with a sort of aim to produce high quality analytical content for non-top six clubs, but presenting it in a way that's accessible to everyday fans that maybe wouldn't necessarily get engaged with the sort of more technical, jargon-filled approaches to some tactical analysis that we see. And yeah, it's been great. We've been mainly covering West Ham this season. We've also got a few writers on site for Southampton, Brighton, and we're recruiting this summer to try and increase the amount of clubs we cover. So yeah, head over to the site if you want to check some other stuff out. I also do a lot of South America stuff, so there's a lot of recruitment scouting pieces on there. I'm trying to unearth the next Enzo Fernandez, I suppose.
Brilliant, and it's great to have you on for this, of course, semi-final between West Ham and RZ, Europa Conference League. I've been lining this up for a while, this tie, thinking two of the best teams in the competition this year coming to meet together now at this stage, and we're going to have two cracking ties, I'm sure of it. Going into this, then we've got a team fourth in the Eredivisie versus a team that have struggled in the Premier League this season, but you know the riches of the league itself. West Ham have a lot of very good players, experienced players, up against a side that are talented, quite young though. How do you view this tie? I guess we're both from the UK, but from the Premier League point of view, how is this tie viewed?
Yeah, I think we'll be coming into it with confidence. Obviously, we're recording this the day after West Ham beat Man United last night 1-0, and I think that will inspire a real confidence in the dressing room. And a lot of the media, fan-facing media that the players have done in the run-up to the fixture, it has very much been sort of, we're not overlooking the semi-final, but we've really got our eyes set on the final. I think as well, the motivation of getting knocked out in the semi-final last season against Frankfurt in the Europa League, I think a lot of the players have been through that experience now and will hopefully be able to use that experience to sort of drive them on. That said, I think I've spoke on the podcast on Analytics United this season a few times actually about RZ, both in terms of a team that I would like to avoid in this competition, but also from a recruitment lens, looking at like players like Sugawara, Carlson, Kirkes, and I think with that in mind, there's a lot of players that I think pose a real threat, and I think there can be a tendency, not just from West Ham fans, but Premier League fans in particular, in the Europa League and the Conference League, where you have a little bit of a superiority complex because you just assume that because we're a Premier League team that have qualified for European competition, like you say, the riches of the league, therefore we must be better than them and it should be an easy win. We sort of went into that Ghent tie with that mentality, and I think in the first leg we had a real reality check when they sort of pressed us off the park, and frankly with a better side in that first leg, and thankfully we overcame them quite emphatically in the second leg. But I think we'll really need to prepare quite a lot for this one and not just assume that we're going to get through.
So I think from the Netherlands perspective, that the Netherlands don't think that RZ are better than West Ham. They also don't think they're considerably worse at all. I think this is quite a nice even tie to have. And I know that you'll elaborate on this a bit later, Cal, but you think that these sides are quite even in terms of the way they play. And I think from the Dutch perspective, that RZ are a little bit weaker in the defensive compartment. They have a decent record in the league. They have a brilliant record against the traditional top three, Ajax, PSV and Feyenoord. In fact, I put this out on Twitter the other day, if you put the past 4 seasons together, RZ have the best record amongst the 4 of them against each other. So when they come up against these better sides in the league, they're well equipped for it. They know how to play, and it suits their style, I think, because when they've had some games at home, let's say in the league where they expect to win, or even in Europe away from home so far in this campaign, they've actually come up with a few stinkers, and they haven't been as good as you might think. If they were more consistent, they'd be really pushing final at the top of the Eredivisie this season. They were top at one point, but kind of fell away. So it's a team that are full of potential, full of talented players, and I'm sure are going to make the club lots of money either this summer or the summer after, as is usual for us at Alkmaar. well coached under Pascal Janssen. I think I had my doubts over him at points over the past couple of years, but I think he is a very good coach. This stage is new for him. My point being, though, that I think if AZ can get the best out of their best players over these 2 legs, they could just edge it. But I think it's going to be like that. I don't think West Ham are going to thrash AZ in one of the legs. But I do think that the physicality could come into it a little bit. What do you understand about AZ's best players? Before the show, we'll talk about Milos Kerkez, for example. He's probably the hottest prospect, the left back, but he's suspended for the first leg. So it could be that a replacement comes in for him. But who else has really stood out for you that you're actually quite worried about in this side?
Yeah, so I think well, the one I was going to bring up, and there's question marks over whether he will actually play, as we spoke about before the show, is Jesper Karlsson. I think he's been someone who's been on my radar for a while now, and the left-hand side of West Ham's attack has been an area of contention for probably the best part of 2 seasons now. I think the way we set up, it's clear that the right side of our attack is far stronger with Bowen, who provides a constant goal threat and is also a bit of a creative force. And in Benrahma and Fornals, though they have both contributed very effectively, I think Benrahma has his shortcomings. He scored yesterday, but again, anyone that sees the goal, De Gea should have probably saved it. And I think a lot of the time, Benrahma's decision making is questionable, and a lot of his goals have come from penalties. So finding a left winger who can both create and score at a prolific rate has been something that I've been keeping an eye out for. And I think Karlsson ticks that box. I think his ability to drift inside and sort of act as a second striker, using his off-ball movement, teaming up with Pavlidis, I think is just brilliant. But like I say, we don't know if he's going to play. And then I think the other one that is a real sort of concern for me in terms of his movement and his pace is Yukinari Sugawara at right back. I think it looks likely that we'll probably play Aaron Cresswell at left back. He's been in pretty good form the last few games. And I think in terms of being able to sort of play out effectively from the back, and I'll come to talk about, I'm sure we'll talk about AZ's press in a bit. I think having someone like Cresswell who can play those balls into the channels and is happy to go long, but is also quite accurate in finding Antonio further up the pitch, I think that could be crucial as a sort of release valve to get to bypass the press. Even though it might be ugly, it probably is effective. But I think the flip side is that Sugawara's movement and pace could cause real problems for an aging Aaron Cresswell, who, for all his strengths, I don't think physicality or athleticism is necessarily one at this late stage in his career. And I think if we don't keep a real close eye on that, that could become a problem. The one benefit is that we do have Declan Rice on the sort of left side of that defensive midfield duo, or trio now with Paqueta if we play a 4-3-3. And I think his ability to cover space is, as everyone will know, is elite and well established at this point. So if Cresswell is struggling, I have confidence that Rice will be happy to cover, and also Nafer Gerd, if he plays, has exceptional recovery pace. So I think it's just going to be about needing to be very well organised at the back. But we played against United last night and the defence looked brilliant. So I think as long as they're not too knackered after playing almost 100 minutes of high intense football and going again a few days later, I think we should just about be okay.
And AZ had the next day of rest, but they played away at Ajax in a 0-0 draw. But both sides had their chances in that game. I'll quickly run through the AZ 11 that may play that in the first leg. Matthew Ryan, people may know from the Premier League, was a goalkeeper at Brighton at one point. He's been all right, AZ keeper. Then you've got Sugawara at right back, who, he's a threat. He's really come through this season in particular. Looks a lot more mature now and has his sensibilities at right back. Then you've got the back two here, the centre backs, Hatzidiakos and Burkema will be the centre back pairing. Burkema has been, I guess, a weaker link out of the two, but has been coming back into form now that he's back from injury. Bruno Martins Indy has been injured for a long time, but he would have been a familiar name also to people. So AZ have got some injuries throughout the side. And it's likely that Meistervitz will be the replacement left back instead of Kerkez. I mean, that is a big dropping him in there against Bowen. And I think could be something for West Ham to exploit in that first leg. But yeah, Kerkez should be back for the second leg. Midfield, Yodi Klassi, former Southampton. He's been very good, actually. Defensive midfield, captain, leading the side. Tijani Vidas. Now, he's someone who's a bit of a late bloomer. Not in his early 20s now, but he's come through this season, real force in midfield, and he gets forward in these bigger games where other players might just sit back a little. He does get forward. Sven Meinens is an attacking midfielder. Then out the wings, you're probably going to have Van Brederode and Jens Odgaard, who came off with an injury against Ajax. Probably should be back for this one. Vangelis Pavlidis is not like a prolific striker really for AZ, but he's a good all-round, good touch and good finish on him. So when he's fit and firing, he's a really good striker. So with a few players out, that's probably going to be the 11. And I think that left side of usually Carlson and Kirkes in that first leg won't really be there. Carlson might be back on the bench, I hear, for this one. It's going to be down the right. And Odgaard, I'm not sure about him sometimes. I don't think he's as high quality as the likes of Pavlidis and Carlson. But with Sugawara with him as well, could be the way that AZ come forward in that on Thursday night. Again, try and get Reinders in supporting Pavlidis in the box.
Yeah, I think from a West Ham point of view, that's probably more concerning as well, in the sense that I know that the left-hand side of RZ's side is definitely the strongest, but our weaker side is probably our left. So like I've said with Cresswell, but also depending on who we play, whether we play Fornals or Benrahma on that left-hand side, I think you get two very different players in what they do. I think Fornals is a very aggressive presser and diligent worker and provides great defensive cover. I think Benrahma is probably more of a maverick in the sense that he is the player that can make things happen just on a whim, but he likes to try to make things happen a little bit too often and can cede possession frequently as a result. And I think if you've got the pace of Sugawara and Van Brederode as well on the other side to hit us on the counter if Benrahma makes a misstep in the final third, and then you guys can hit us on the break, I think with Cresswell tracking back or someone like that might be a bit of an issue. But yeah, I think it really should be a great matchup. And I think it always baffles me when I look at RZ's squad, because I know you mentioned the two centre-backs there, but you've got Decker and Wouter Ghost both coming through who are 18. And I think whenever your centre-backs leave, them two will just come through and presumably catch you multiples of millions as well whenever it comes to selling them.
Just continuous cycle of players coming through. Yeah, it's really great to have this youth team of RZ. They've won the Youth League, for example, as well, the Champions League equivalent, and they look really good for the future. Tell us more about the tactics then. How do West Ham and RZ play? Why is it you see them quite similar, Cal? You've really looked into this. This is your meat and drink. Tell us more about the tactics.
It's interesting really, because I think earlier in the season I wouldn't have said it, because West Ham, it's been a bit of a transitional season this season, and I think it's been disappointing because I think we set the bar so high for ourselves in the previous two seasons by finishing 6th and 7th and qualifying for Europe on both counts. And I think this season was a product of the end of last season, where teams had slowly started to work out that if they just gave us possession, we weren't very good at using it. So that limited what we were able to do, because we'd got to Europe on two counts by being a very good defend your box, force the opposition out wide, let them cross, win the headers, hit them on the break, rely on Antonio and the fact that he's just an athletic freak who can just power past centre-backs whenever. And though he might not be the most accurate of finishers, he can just create things just by way of being a bully and then providing for teammates. Similarly, I think Sufal has been integral in getting the best out of Bowen in previous seasons, because his overlapping runs force the defenders to commit to defending him, which opens space around the edge of the box for Bowen to cut inside and curl one into the top corner. And that this season didn't really happen as much, because we tried to transition into a side that were more comfortable on the ball, less dependent on hitting teams on the counter, but without replacing the manager. So we had David Moyes, who has made a career of being defensively astute and a very good counter-attacking coach, was then tasked with coaching a possession comfortable side, which just didn't really work. And I think the reason that we're in this sort of lowly position in the Premier League by our recent standards is that the transition didn't work. But our form in the last couple of months, bar a few blip results against better sides, City recently, has been good, because we've reverted back to the style of football that Moyes has earned his name off, which is not dissimilar, from what I've seen at least, to RZ, in the sense that everything is built on the foundation of a pretty solid defence. We're happy to allow the opposition into the wide channels because we feel that our centre-backs are dominant enough aerially to be able to deal with any crosses that come into the box. We congest the middle channel with Souček, with Rice, with Paquetá, who presses like an animal, and much to many West Ham fans' surprise, he's actually such a diligent defender. I think a lot of people assumed, oh, we're buying this attacking Brazilian central midfielder. It's going to be a sort of fancy number 10, going to carry him, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not been the case. Since he's dropped back into an 8 position rather than a 10, he's just been a man transformed. And I think yesterday's performance against Manchester United was probably the greatest example of that thus far. And I think those are the similarities in the sense that RZ similarly are happy to force the opposition into the channels and defend their box well and hit on the counter. I think, again, in attack, it's very cross heavy, probably more so for RZ than West Ham, because I think part of the transition towards a possession comfortable side and the recruitment we've done in Paquetá, in Aguerd, we do have a little bit of diversity now in the way we build up. We seem to be more comfortable in playing through the thirds rather than just going long to Antonio and waiting for him to bring it down or play it into the path of Benrahma, Bowen, Paquetá. We still do that, but we can play through Rice. We can play into the feet of Paquetá. Whereas I think from what I've seen of RZ, there is still a lot more dependence on getting into the final third, relying on the intelligent off-ball movement of Carlson, of Odegaard, even Pavlidis in his ability to drag centre-backs out and open up spaces for the wide players. And then the overlapping threat, obviously, of Kirkes and similarly Sugawara, but slightly less so on the other side. I think will still be dangerous for us because I think there are opportunities to get in behind. But I think, yeah, we probably would be the more comfortable of the two sides if one of us was to say, you know what, you have the possession and try and make things happen, because I think we're slowly getting there with that. I think it will be really interesting. I think another area that we're really strong at is set pieces, and that seems to have clicked recently since Cresswell's come back into the side, just by way of his delivery. So that'll be something to watch out for as well. But yeah, it should make for a really enjoyable watch. I think there's going to be some players for us that will be key, I think, based on the way that RZ play. I think it's a bizarre one with RZ's press, I think, because I, in my mind, think of them as a good pressing team, but they're not actually the most aggressive pressers. They're just very intelligent in when they press.
No.
Yeah, like obviously, previously under Slot, they were incredibly aggressive. Exactly. But I think Janssen has a slightly more conservative approach in the sense that there's probably less trigger presses. Like they're happy to let the fullbacks, or like similar to Moyes, let the wide players have the ball, but as soon as it comes into the middle, the central midfielders will press. Pavlidis will make a press from behind. He'll drop in and force it, which generally means that either the ball gets recycled back out wide, where I'm quite happy to defend it, or it gets passed back to the goalkeeper, who then punts long, and then RZ will win a throw from a misdirected pass, or they'll win the second ball because they'll press onto the receiver. I think that's something we'll need to watch out for. But it could, in a way, play into our hands because, like I said, one of the ways that we like to get forward is to just go long into Antonio, who probably more so than anyone in the league, in our league, and in Europe, to be honest, on his day is made for that. He's just such a athletic beast. Like he just takes the ball down and will just turn. And we saw it against United yesterday. He picked up the ball on the edge of our box, carried it all the way to their half, and he was through on goal if Wan-Bissaka didn't take him down and get a yellow. So I think if he's on form, he'll be brilliant. I think the flip side is, I think Thilo Kehrer, if he plays, could be important. And Naif Aguerd as well, just for those press resistant defenders. So we're not forced into going long and giving up possession. We're happy to go long, but it's going to be accurate because we've got good passers of the ball, and not players that are just going to freak out if they're put under pressure and just kick it wherever. Like Kehrer will quite happily do a little chop and pass it into the midfield or whatnot. I think that would be the main ones. I think Kehrer, there's slight question marks, has been this season with regards to his sort of positional awareness and his defensive discipline. I think coming from a PSG side where you don't really need to be that disciplined defensively because you're unlikely to be punished because you're so much more dominant than the other team, he has a tendency to just really press out and press out and press out, which can leave gaps in behind. And I think if RZ can bait that press and make Thilo Kehrer step out, and then release the ball in behind for someone like Van Brederode or Carlson in the second leg, or Kerkez in the second leg on the overlap. There could be space there. This is all dependent on whether Vladimir Coufal's fit. If he is, he probably plays. But I think there is some benefits to Kara.
There's lots of things that AZ could exploit, and I think there's lots of things that could really hurt them as well. So that's what makes it so interesting. There's lots of little dependency, lots of little battles on the pitch, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally think that Antonio versus Berkema is a complete mismatch, and I think that could be vital in some ways in the first leg. That physicality is just not what Arsenal are quite used to in the Eredivisie, but at the same time, they are so good against those top sides in the Dutch league, where the strikers have a bit more about them, and also they've beaten Lazio home and away in the knockout rounds already. So they're a really good side then that are up for an occasion. They're up for a really big game. Not seeing this side up against like a real top side in Europe. We're not seeing them against like a Real Madrid or a Man City, but we have seen it against these mid-tier sides already in Europe, and they can play against them. So I think this will be, it could be won or lost in London, because RZ, if they meet a West Ham side that are not quite on the ball, think it might be a bit easy, like some of the other games I've had so far this season in Europe, then I think RZ will punish them. If, however, they're really up for it, they use the crowd to their advantage just to sell out, and they're on it, I think they'll win that home leg. And then RZ will have a lot of work to do in the second leg, given that they will, might keep a clean sheet. They might have their players back. They'll want to attack. And then West Ham getting that extra goal in the Netherlands might just see them over the line, which kind of brings me on to my prediction. That's why I can see West Ham winning that first leg. I'm going to go with 2-1, and then I think it'll be a draw in the Netherlands, which might see West Ham through. I think the more optimistic side of me sees this being really, really quite close over both legs. Maybe a penalty shootout decides it, or like an extra time goal.
No, not again.
But yeah, I think it's going to be one of them. I can see it going like that. I think it's going to be really close. I don't think West Ham are going to find it very comfortable. But how about you?
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. For all the reasons we've mentioned, I think tactically it could be a real battle. And I think RZ have shown time and time again this season, not just against Anderlecht, but in the Netherlands as well. Just mentality-wise, they're really strong. They won't roll over. I think I've listened to some press conference from Janssen as well, and I think that's something that he tends to speak about quite frequently, is the mentality of his team to sort of, when they go one goal down, not just sort of give up. They'll dig in, and I think as well with the bench, particularly if Carlson's on it, he has some tools at his disposal to bring on and change the game dependent on the game state. I think based on the atmosphere last night against Man U, the ground was very loud. I think there's a positivity creeping into the fan base that hasn't been there this season, for obvious reasons, because we've underperformed and it has been hostile at times. And there seems to sort of be a real coming together at the minute, between fans, between the club, because obviously this cup run. And I think given that it's a sellout, the Europa nights tend to be electric anyway. I was there for both the Lyon and the Sevilla games last season, and that was just an unbelievable experience. I think if we can match those levels, I think, like you say, it could be won or lost in London, but I think we need to really try and stamp our authority in this first leg while we're playing the weakened RZ side without some of their key players in front of our home crowd. I think if we can keep a clean sheet, we kept one against United with Rashford, etc. If we can put in a similarly impressive defensive performance and make the most of our counters, I'd say maybe a 2-0, potentially 3 in the first leg wouldn't be unbelievable, but I could see RZ scoring just based on whether they successfully exploit those gaps in our defence that I anticipate being there. So maybe a 2-1, 3-1. And then I think, unfortunately for us, the game is perfectly set up for the return of Kerkez, for potentially the return of a increasingly fit Carlson, who, like you've said, is always up for the big occasions, and an RZ side that have an incredible record against Ajax, against Feyenoord, against PSV. They'll be so up for going against the Premier League opposition, I think, to sort of assert themselves as one of the big teams in Netherlands, and also to represent Dutch football in a season where there seems to be a shift in tide in the Eredivisie, or Ajax potentially not even qualifying for the Champions League. I think that it's all to play for over there. So I think to really step up to the mark and sort of use this as a sort of watershed moment, I think the second leg could just be incredibly interesting and very scary. But I think we should just about eke through across the 2 legs. But I really wouldn't be surprised if the second leg ends up taking us to extra time.
Well, I hope we get this tie as tense as it's going to be for both of us.
I don't know if my heart can take it.
And a European final awaits one of these teams. Then a team from Netherlands did it last season, finals. This RZ team, I just think, whilst final gone on to new heights this season, I do think this RZ team's better than that final team from last season, because they just have, even though they're not the best individually sometimes, they are a very neat, very good at passing kind of side. I just think that is a real strength for theirs, compared to most teams in Europe. And that's how they're going to do it, if they are going to do it, and keeping it tight defensively. But yeah, Cal, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for coming on. It's been great having you. And yeah, all the best, I guess. May the best team win over these next 2 legs. And hopefully the Netherlands get into this final. Of course, if they win both legs and they win the final, I said, the Netherlands become the 5th best side in Europe and overtake France in the coefficient. But I don't quite see that. But it'll be an absolute. I had to put that in there for Dutch football.
That's
followers.
great. I didn't even know that. I mean, if West Ham weren't involved in the tie, I would be cheering on RZ. But obviously, for obvious reasons, I am hoping that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And of course, anyone listening, if you're new, do give us a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to Football-Oranje. Check out our website, football-oranje.com. There's loads more on there. To do with tie, to do with Dutch football in general, all in English, of course. We follow the league, we follow the Dutch national team. So if you want to get involved, go and do that, and follow us on Twitter as well. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and hope you enjoyed the 2 legs.